Today I'll tell you why learning English is taking you so long. Hi and ahoj pro všechny moje nové české subscribery. Adam Carson here. Now I've been teaching English for over 10 years and I've noticed that pretty much every English teacher is using the same materials. But there is a secret weapon and that's why I want to talk to you about sequencing today. I'm not a native English speaker, but I've always wanted to learn to speak like one because I wanted to be seen as me and not as a stereotypical foreigner. So I've always took extra special care to work on my speaking because I wanted that native speaker's fluency and accent. So I want to talk about learning through better sequencing today. Sequences. Now, I think it's so undervalued actually, but when I think about, I think back about myself learning English, I've been pretty much always told to learn grammar super well, and then the speaking like a native will kind of happen automatically as if by magic, which is ridiculous, of course. That's not how it happens at all. But I bought it at the time. I believed it totally. Maybe actually let me show you what I mean, okay? So try to say this word out loud. Okay, now many students would say something like literally, or literally, something like that. They're all good efforts, but not exactly correct. Now the reason usually is that you're trying to read the pictures we call letters instead of, I don't know, worrying about, what to do with your tongue and lips and so on and so forth. Now, I know it may seem strange, but this is exactly how all of us learn our first language, right? Our parents, they train us to make some basic sounds first before worrying about words and sentences. Now, that's why I think of my teaching method as a reverse or upside down English, because I often start with showing my students how to train their movements first, right? How to create the correct sounds. In fact, let's jump into my app. You can find it at accentartisan.com and let me walk you through it a bit. I think it'll show you better what I mean. Alright, here we are at accentartisan.com and it says master a standard British or American accent, and the really cool thing is that it only takes 3 months and 15 minutes a day. Pretty sweet. But we're focusing on talking about the importance of sequencing for today. So let's just scroll down. We don't have to do anything else. You can read all of this later, and I'm going to stop at this little green area. And this green circle that says starter, I'm going to contract it because we want to get that nice bird's eye view of the sequence that I often use with my students as well. So the starter part, the green circle, that's just your intro. We can talk about that a little later. But here, when you look at the rest, the other circles, that will give you an idea of how I think it's best to progress with your English studies. So you should start, in my estimation, with pronunciation. So that's this little red circle, pronounce. Now if you click on it, you get to see what parts come into that. So I start with sound recognition, where I'll give you couples or pairs of sounds and you would have to tell me if you hear a difference between the two. Very simple, right? So it could be something like ah. Are there differences? Are those sounds the same? How do you hear it? That would be kind of the first step, just to make sure that your ears are okay and to test you a little bit as well, right? Then we move on to individual sounds. Now we've got vowels, consonants, then we put them into clusters, and then we start just working on more volume essentially, right? So we get from individual sounds to syllables to double syllables, then we get to words, and then we get to sentences and some other things as well. So I usually start with teaching students and drilling them to make sure that pronunciation is on point and that these muscles, your lips, your tongue and everything is working and properly. But more of that later. Let's look at the blue circle now. So that says US versus UK. As you know, this website is about teaching you a British or an American accent. This part is crucial for that. And what it does is that it shows you where to put which sounds, right? So most people think that British and American English is super different or that British is more difficult than American, which is actually not the case. The simplest difference between the two is that they use the same sounds but in different places. So that's what this sequence is about. To give you an example, I can say ask and answer in British or ask and answer, right? So in that case, I'm putting R in British English and changing it to A in American English. Ask, 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 ask. So it's not that, one English has different sounds. It's just that we use them in different places. You can say we use them in different sequences as well. But our main sequence, to go back to the page, is pronunciation. That's first. Then we sort of sort it out with, making sure that you are working mostly on the accent that you want, so British or American. Then we move on to emphasis. Now, English is a stress-timed language, so you have to be able to communicate through stress, through contrast. And that's what this part is about, right? So it helps you with understanding any accent. And of course, then you have to master stress and emphasis when it comes to individual words and later on in sentences as well, because that's how we communicate. And it really is pretty essential for English, right? So once you know how to do that, we can take a look at melody, right? So melody and rhythm, they are very much linked together, and they're important for English in terms of speaking and grammar as well, because that all feeds into grammar later on. But as I've told you, English is a language based on contrast. So you can make contrasts with speed. So sometimes you speak quickly, sometimes you slow down, maybe to make a point. Sometimes it's very loud, sometimes it's super quiet. So all of these things we use in English, including pitch. Pitch means that sometimes your voice goes really high and sometimes really low. Again, another way of making that contrast super, super obvious, right? The more obvious it is, the easier to understand you. So that's your melody. Then we move on to vocabulary. So we incorporate everything we've learned from, the segments, the sections before, and we try to incorporate that into vocabulary. That feeds into grammar as well, which I don't have in this program, but I do that with my students. And then sort of the final step of this process would be the vibe. Now, what is a vibe? Quite often, well, maybe not super often, but quite often people are worried that if they learn an accent, they kind of stop being who they are. They lose their sense of individuality or something like that, which is of course ridiculous. All you're doing is making it more precise and more under your control. So vibe deals with that, because once you know how to say things and to structure them properly, you can pick and choose what best fits your personality with, the surrounding cultural and linguistic context as well. That's where jokes come from and many other things as well. It's super complicated, but I've simplified it to this sequence. So all in all, I would say first you need to learn pronunciation really well with all of its aspects. Then you start working on vocabulary and grammar. And that feeds into your own personality and the way you want to talk in English that, is unique to you. If you want to try it yourself, just go to accentartisan.com, register, and take on my 3-month intensive challenge if you're like me and you don't want to be seen as a stereotypical foreigner forever and ever. Now, if you find this video helpful, or if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like it. If you loved it, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for your attention today, and I'll hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.